Good afternoon to the last session of the day. So we are between you and the social hour, I think. So we will make it short and quick for you, I think. So my name is Christian. So I'm a senior product marketing manager. And with me I have
Richard Astvans, principal PM lead at Teams meetings.
So, and what we'd like to do today is to speak with you about all the investments that we made in Teams and all how it comes together to really ensure good quality for you and your users. So if we talk about Teams, we really talk about it's a born in the cloud architecture based on microservices. So it's really built from scratch for the cloud, where in the past, Link and Skype for Business, OCS, LCS, and all the different name changes we made were more of a product for on-premises, which we then brought to the cloud and made modifications on it. So now Teams is really born in the cloud. And that's all back up also on the Microsoft Global Network, which is really important. And you will see that a little bit later in the slides, what that really means for Teams. Then on top of that, we really talk about high quality, resilient for audio and video. We made great investments here. We have some really nice examples about that. And then all driven about modern operations. So the way we can operate Microsoft Teams now is really different from how we have been able in the past for Skype for Business Online. But with all that investments, there are still situations where the user might have an issue. So we integrated also really good things to that, to really show the user when something is going wrong on his device, his network, etc. And then, of course, important for you guys really to have IT insights that gives you the information to make things even better. So if we now look into the Microsoft Global Network, and I'm pretty sure most of you have maybe heard of it, but maybe not in the context of Teams. So what does it really mean? So we have a global footprint with the Microsoft Global Network. We are one of the top two biggest networks in the world when it comes to all that connections. So thousands of routes and miles of really dark fiber cables. And on the next slide, we have an example of that, how that looks like. We peer directly with 2,700 ISP providers. Yeah? What does it mean? It means your user enter really quickly our Microsoft Global Network without crossing the internet too long. Right? So we keep that connection really short, and we have some tips how you can improve and check that also with your providers. So, and then it comes also that we deploy media processors and relays in 50 plus different data centers. Yeah, so it's comparable to what you deployed on-prem today as an edge server. Yeah, so we keep really care of that. And then you enter our network, and we take care of the latency. Something is really weird with the...
Yeah, something's off with the displays. Keeps blanking every time you switch a slide.
Okay.
We can keep going.
Try. Really to make sure that we reduce the numbers of hops, and that all the network is really prioritized your audio and video traffic in that case. And then there's something different now also about meetings, where we are really able to host the meetings close to the user. But we are going more into detail that. And then also we consolidated IP range, but also ports to make it much easier for you. So if you now look into the Microsoft Global Network and how that looks like, so it really stretches around the world here. It's fast, it's global, and it's an available network. It's 100,000 miles of fiber in 130 plus locations. With Global Edge deployed, and as I said before, 2,700 ISPs in 190 plus locations. And if you look now, what does it really mean? Oh, there was an unexpected animation. We went black.
Folks at the back, could you help us sort the display out? Hi there.
Features.
Sorry about that, folks. Just give us a couple of minutes. Let's try to get this.
I'm not sure about this big adapter thing and VGA and DVI. I put it a little bit more to the left. I don't know if that helps. Or maybe we go to a different port.
Do you want to use this one?
No.
So what different one would you use? Which different one would you use?
Just a different cable, maybe.
Oh, so
Maybe this.
I think. So what happened? How did they go down? It just went down.
Yeah, they just in the middle of everything they went black, and then they come back. And
Like that.
I think the cable is broken or something. Live troubleshooting, huh?
You haven't even seen the demo yet.
Yeah. I only pray to the demo gods and not to the PowerPoint god. That was maybe the issue. Which number is that?
I think it's number 7.
Oh, you did on number 7 again?
7.
Also.
Cool. Let's test it again.
I will.
Cool. So what does that peering really mean? Yeah. So here really some examples how quickly you can enter our Microsoft Global Network with that. Here we have an example from the UK with a peering point in London, and you reach our data center actually in 26 milliseconds. Yeah. But there are also situations. Here is an example from Paris. We reach our network in 8 milliseconds, which is really quick, and then we take really care of you. And also here an example from close by, here from Florida, and we hit the pier in Miami. But the important point is also stuff can go wrong, right? And that's really where you can start to test and work with your internet provider to make sure that you also enter the closest peering location. So this is an example from a user from Scotland, but he enters our network actually in New York. Yeah, so that is really bad. So that means there was no close peering point. Maybe also you are a customer that only have one single internet breakout in your company. So that is not really helpful as well. So you should make sure in your local locations that you have the right internet breakouts and then can enter our network really quickly in that case. If you look now here on signaling and ports, we also reduced the ports. So in the past, we had all that high ports for Skype for Business as well. So now we really reduced the port ranges to make it much easier for you. Now also Teams is now using a longer SIP. Now we use HTTP REST to really make things also easier from a signaling perspective and to make it more reliable. We still support, of course, all the phones, etc., and we provide SIP gateways for that. The same as for video interop partners so that they can interconnect with us. So, and actually these are not new rules, it's the same as we had with Skype for Business before. So the same principles, keep the media parts short. So if we can reach the second endpoint directly, we will do that. If we cannot, we will use one of our relays. And I have an example on the next slide about that. So in that case, Alice will try to reach Bob. Of course, the signaling goes via HTTP REST to our cloud. And then, if they can establish the connection directly, they will have a peer-to-peer call, the same way as Skype for Business, Link, and OCS was doing that in the past. If this is not possible, because of different scenarios, maybe you guys are in the same hotel, but direct connections are blocked in that network, or there are different firewalls and the connection is not able to get established, then we will jump in with our media relays and make that connection happen. Another principle here is really to minimize the traffic via the internet. So, as in the examples before, and there is also a website where you can check out if your provider actually has direct peering points with us, yeah, to really keep the traffic low and make sure that you enter as quickly as possible our network. What does that mean? So if you look on that full flow, there's your corporate network where you still can make all the adjustments like quality of service, etc., and really make sure that everything is good. But then there is that little piece called internet, yeah, where it's really out of your control. Yeah? So keep that route really short, enter our peering point, and as far as you reach our global network, you're back in the game, and you can be sure that we take care of your traffic actually. So really optimized. So let's see how that looks in a real-world example. In this example, we have Alice sitting in the US, and she will try to call Bob. So that means Alice will reach the closest peering point of her, and she will enter our network with that. So then we take care of all the traffic over to Europe. In that example, let's say to Paris. We will exit there via a peering point again, and she's able to make that call with Bob. Meetings. So with meetings in the past, it was always, if you, and I think that was a motivation for most of the customers to deploy Skype pools all over the world, to really have the meeting locations close by that user. Yeah? So in Skype for Business Online, the problem in the past was that that location where you opened up your tenant, that was the location where also all your meeting gets hosted. We had some things that was called regional hosted meetings, but we figured also out we had a lot of problems with that, or it was not that optimal then, or was solving so many cases than customers expected. It was quite complicated, etc. So how does it now work with Teams? In Teams, you get that principle, but it's also dynamic. Yeah? That means we will make sure that we host the meeting close to the users, and let's see how that looks in reality. So in that case, we have a tenant that was opened up in the US. It's a US-based company, and they now have different users. The first user will enter the Microsoft Global Network via his peering point again, and will open up the meeting close to his location. All the other users connect then to the peering points as well and join that meeting, and everyone has a good experience. Same tenant. They have a bunch of people also around in Europe. And what now happened is they enter the peering points as well, but we open up that meeting in that case, let's say in Amsterdam or in Dublin, yeah, because those users are there. That all happens magically, automatically. You don't have to activate something for that. It's just automatic. Yeah? And I think that's a big change, and we make really sure with that to keep that media locally in that case. Cool.
Great. So before we go into this next section, I just wanted to share with you a little bit of the insight from the product teams about how we went about building Teams meetings. So when we started on this a few years ago, our philosophy or our key objective really, it wasn't to minimize the number of faults that we have in our service or our endpoints. That was one of the things that we went after, but that wasn't the key objective. The key objective was actually to maximize the number of meetings that users can have in a productive way. Now, I know those two sound very similar, so let me just talk a little bit about the delta, the difference between those, because that really drove our product philosophy. And the difference is that we look at improving a meeting experience from a 360 perspective. So it's not just about fixing things in our service or our clients. We looked at a lot of data, and we found that one of the biggest reasons for meetings to not go smoothly, to drop, to not connect, people to join late, were external. There were things like your last mile network, dropping you out of the meeting. There were things like devices failing and so on. Even things like your environment. So we went about building a philosophy saying that our job is not just to fix the issues that we control, the internal issues, but also the external ones. And the ones that we cannot, because external issues, of course, come with problems that you cannot solve from the stack. We also built a philosophy to extend our reach to the users themselves, to be able to empower them that they can go help themselves. The end goal is the same. When something goes wrong, get you back into the meeting as quickly as possible. Because when you're not, then it's not just you that suffers, it's also everyone else in the meeting. Now, with that context, let's look at some of the things that, some of the features that we've built in Teams. So we're going to look at 3 sets of features here. There's going to be your network, there's going to be your devices, and then there's going to be your environment, and about how we went about fixing the small issues that we see in there. So first off, let me just talk about the network. I'm going to show you a comparison video. This is where we went about working on the codec in a way to build features that the codec supports, that in the end, the net result was that when the network's great, video flows great, no issues. But what happens when there's congestion in the network? What happens when there's a lot of packet loss in the network? How does our codec handle that better? So I'll show you this, I'll play this video, and you'll see on the left is before the treatment that we applied. So we applied a couple of features called long-term reference frames and a better bandwidth estimation. So I'll play the video, and then I'll tell you a little bit about those features. So notice that freeze. It takes about 10 seconds for that to unfreeze previously, but we were already on our way well before that. Also look at the number of freezes that you're going to see. There's a lot of freezes that we've just avoided with this algorithm from even happening in the first place. And the way that we did this was, in the first one, where you see that long freeze that doesn't recover for the longest time, we built something called long-term reference frames. Video compression is all about sending the delta from the previous frame and not sending the entire frame. And that's how you can compress a large voluminous amount of data into a stream that can be real time. What we did with long-term reference frames is all the frames that we send, the delta frames that we send, always have to go be added back to a reference frame. So what happens when you lose a reference frame is that you have to wait a long time for that fully encoded reference frame to be sent again to the receiver so that you can get going with the delta frames. So what long-term references does is that it helps us cache a reference frame that was further off in the past. So sure, the recovery frame that comes along is going to be a little bit less efficient, a little bit less smaller than it would have been, but it lets you recover much faster than waiting for the full reference frame to come back, which is about 10 seconds. We saw big improvement with that. The other thing that we did was we just worked on estimating the bandwidth better, which is in the class of just preventing issues from happening. So you wouldn't know this by looking at it, but we are making a very complicated trade-off in the spatial quality versus the temporal quality. So we are trying to keep, by sacrificing a little bit of the spatial quality in the background and in things that might not necessarily be the area of interest in that person's video, by sacrificing a little bit of the quality there, we've traded off and we've ensured that we had enough bytes and enough protection on the frames to avoid the frame freezes that we had in the first place. And we measured this and we can see how much the improvement is. So when you're doing video, and especially when you're in challenging network conditions, you'll see a much better experience with the team's video experiences. For the next set of features, I'll again, staying with the theme of the network, right? For the next set of features, let me just talk this through a story. So we live our product all the time. A large part of our development team is actually in Prague in Central Europe. So our days start early. And like a lot of other people, if my meetings are at like 4:35 in the evening, then I'll go ahead and take that meeting on my commute. I'll get a head start on my commute and I can take that call, and by the time I get home, I'll be done with the meeting. This is something we've seen a lot of people do, and I do that. So let's take that case. So it's 4 p.m., I left home, I got on the bus, and I'm on my commute home. You've connected over mobile internet, or maybe your bus has public Wi-Fi. So first off, one of the things that we see there is when you have video congestion that you cannot recover from, when you have video congestion that you couldn't fix, for example, from the stuff that we did in the codec improvements, Teams Mobile will now automatically detect that. And this is a very sophisticated algorithm that's running in the back, which has been trained on actual real data, which pinpoints cases where the video congestion, where the video is suffering because of congestion on the network. And notice how it just distills all of that information into a very specific call to action to the user. So as a user, it goes back to our principle of empowering the user. So as a user, you can simply decide, is it good enough for you to continue without the video? You choose to turn that off, your audio keeps flowing, and you're on your way. This is the meeting from hell. So of course, in another couple of minutes, I'm going through the tunnel that's on my way home. In this case, this is a loss of the network. We all go through tunnels. It's going to come back. So how Teams, actually, before I show you how Teams treats it, let me just kind of paint a picture of what you would have without this, the product doing this. You'd lose the network, and then you'd go ahead and you'd frantically try to figure out when you've got network back. You'd go ping your favorite website or whatever. Once you've established that that's happened, you'd go back into how you joined into the meeting, however you did, and you'll go ahead and try to join the meeting back. Spend another few seconds, all the while people don't know what's going on and why you're waiting here. Now let's take a quick look at the Teams mobile experience for this. And I'm going to, just a quick note, I'm going to simulate the loss of the network by turning off the Wi-Fi and bringing it back up, so don't get thrown off by that. So there you go. I just entered the tunnel.
What a sound.
So on your behalf, Teams is constantly pinging the network. Teams is not just pinging the network that you were connected on, it's connecting any network and tunnel out. It's frantically trying to find any network that it can on your behalf, so you don't have to do that. And once it gets the network back, it automatically, seamlessly gets you right back into the same meeting where you were, viewing the same content that you were viewing earlier. So what happened here was, if you look at the subtle experience, if you look at the experience from the perspective of people that were in the meeting, you didn't just drop out of the meeting and then come back in. It's continuity. And sure, there was a gap in your meeting, but we did the best that we could without that happening. Like I said, we're not done with this meeting. We've got more to get out of it. So I get home, and my home has a dead spot. There's still a few minutes remaining of the meeting, and I know that, that this time when I lose the network, it's not going to come back because it is a dead spot. Let me just show you the other feature that you can use at that point in time. So I lose the network this time, and I get the option. Oh, I think we're still on the previous slide, Christian.
Oh.
Yep, there we go. Huh? This time when I lose the network, I'm going to get the option to dial in using PSTN. I just have a few minutes left of the meeting. I don't mind just dialing back into the meeting and continue that. Now, as you can see, when I choose the dial-in option, I didn't have to go and enter all those conference ID numbers and the hash and the pound, and what's the difference between those anyway? I don't know. And there. So we got the most easy experience to get you back into the meeting in this way. And again, the choice was in the user's hands. You know, if it were a temporary loss, sure, you can wait and you know that you're going to get it back. I'm not kidding. I use this every day. When I come in the mornings, and mostly when I get into work in the mornings, I'm on a call already, and we always just have that dreaded zone of silence where I would park in the 5th floor of the basement, and that's -5, and get in the elevator all the way up. And now after we built this feature, I get in there, I get out of my car, I know already I'm going to lose the internet. I don't even take the my device out. I just get to my floor, and I actually know exactly when I'm going to be back into the meeting. So this one's a real lifesaver. So this is how we were just making sure that even when networks aren't great, how we can actually help with the user. Now in the next couple of excuse me, in the next couple of slides, we're going to see how we've built intelligent alerts to help the users help themselves as part of these meetings. Now notice how I talked about devices. You'd be surprised how often devices fail and cause your meetings to go bad. So we built a whole bunch of alerts that can help users understand, first of all, what's going on, and B, prevent as quickly and as actionably, as inline as possible, the problems that are happening here. I won't show all of these, and we'll do a demo later on. You'll see some of those in there. I'll give you another story about the first one. So I often, in the middle of the day, I'm in a meeting and I'm sitting with someone with my laptop, and I'll turn the volume all the way down because I don't want the dings to disrupt my meeting. And I'll go walk into a meeting, and then I go join the meeting, and the first thing I see is I hear them speaking, but I don't hear their audio. And people are like, "We hear you." Now, the simple fact is that my speakers are off, but what we've seen most people do is instinctively people will hang up and they'll try to join again. They'll try to join again, it wouldn't work this time either. They'll go ahead, they'll actually dial into the meeting. And if only they knew that the problem why they can't be in the meeting is simply because their speakers are at 0 volume. So we built an alert that not only tells you that your speakers are at 0 volume, but also gives you a really easy inline way that you can just simply hit that and get going with your meeting. This is just an example of something that's pretty simple. That's not something that required a lot of training or intelligence, but these are just some of the ways of thinking through it, to think from the user's perspective to be able to solve some of these really simple issues. Some issues aren't that simple. So we've got a poor network indicator that is trained actually on a whole bunch of data that we've collected and correlated that with the user experience. So next time that your meeting is suffering because you're on a bad network and there's something that you can do about it, whether it's move closer to your access point, move from your drawing room into your study, or just if you have another network to connect to, you're made aware of that so that you can go ahead and do that and take those changes. Echo suppression, a lot of times there'll be feedback that comes back into the meeting. We've actually got a very sophisticated algorithm running that not only actively tries to counteract and prevent the buildup of echo, but also once that actually happens, it'll give you an alert and tell you, hey, someone needs to mute themselves because you're causing feedback into the meeting. We also have device failures and switches. Another example that I live through a lot is, you'll connect, whether it's your device that's connected and the dongle runs out of battery in the middle of your call, or whether you join the call from your docking station, picked it up, and walked to a conference room. What we will do is we will automatically detect the failure of those devices, or actually even just devices failing all the time. We'll automatically detect that and then switch you off to the next best device that you have. So again, this is not something that is going to end up dropping your call. You have to go figure out on your own. First of all, this is the class of things that we are able to fix. So when we know the device is broken, we've done a lot of probes to understand that the device is actually indeed broken and not just silent or muted or something like that. And then we're able to actually fix that and get you going. Smart device selection. There are scenarios where you may have multiple devices, but the operating system hasn't picked the best or the most optimal device for you. My favorite scenario is I often take a meeting and then I'll walk into one of our conference rooms, and sometimes the conference rooms, some of them aren't set up great. So I'll try to go plug in the little puck and audio is still coming out of my tinny laptop speakers. We're going to detect all of that stuff automatically. We're going to detect that there's a presence of a newer, better device, and we're going to switch to that. Not only that, there's negatives and positives cases there as well. Some of our conference rooms have these TVs plugged in with HDMI, and you plug in the display and all your meeting audio starts to go out of the HDMI display. And that's not the best because it's a TV, someone's turned it off, someone's turned the volume all the way down. We'll go ahead and try to avoid cases like that as well. So there's a whole lot of intelligent prioritization and a decision factory going on in the back which decides what the best device is to use for this particular case. And then the last one, that one's got to be my favorite, the speaking while mute. How many times have you been in a meeting, quiet for the first 20 minutes, and then this is your moment to shine, and you've got that point, and you go and make this impassioned point, and halfway through it, someone cuts you off, and you realize nobody's even hearing you because you were muted the whole time. Well, I hear one of you. So you'll see again, you'll see this in our demo, how we built an algorithm that detects not just noise or a door slamming in your background, but actually a person that is speaking. And if we do detect that you are indeed muted and speaking into it, we'll give you a subtle but important warning that says that. And ever since we've shipped this, there's so many people that have come to me and just said, I do this all the time. And in fact, one that said they didn't like it because now they don't have an excuse to say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you were saying. All right. So for those of you that were listening, I talked about 3 sets of things I was going to talk about, right? What was the third one? There's network, there's devices, and then there's the environment. Now, your environment isn't just your network or the conditions that you're in. We've seen trends, right? I mean, how many of us love open workspaces, open offices?
A few.
Those are a trend. How many of us love working remotely? All of those are great trends, and they really help productivity in many ways. In some ways, they hurt them. But what it does do is it brings up unique challenges for meetings. And we really saw this from our feedback that we were getting up there. With a lot of people working remotely, working from libraries, EDU scenarios, working from their classrooms, we realized that background noise was drowning out a lot of meetings. That started to become one of the things that started to trend up in terms of things that were disturbing meetings from working successfully. So we invested and we built this algorithm. Now this is an algorithm that we trained on a bunch of speech samples that we've collected. And basically, this is headset-based ambient noise reduction. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you how it works a little bit later, but I'm just going to play a clip for you. It's a little subtle, so be careful and try to see. It's basically going to be some noise, and then it's when it's off and when it's on. Try to see if you can tell when it's off and when it's on. Let's hear it. On. Off. Isn't that amazing? So let me just spend a minute and tell you how that works, right? So this is really exciting. This is the kind of stuff that takes a lot of AI, a lot of intelligence to build, but the results are totally worth it. Okay, so now let's geek out for a second. So every audio stack will have something called gain correction, which is basically the stack is just trying to boost up your audio when it thinks that your audio is getting faint. So for example, if you were to move away from your mic, this is what prevents the other people from just hearing you fade out and go off into the ether, which is great. But the problem is that those stacks so far have been dumb. So they don't know the difference when you're trying to speak or when it's your noisy neighbor that's drowning out your voice. So if you look at the waveform up there, what's actually happening is that I'm speaking in the first part, and then I'm quiet. And then the gain correction hears the crosstalk, and it thinks, OK, well, that's the signal that I'm supposed to be boosting up. For some reason, it fell down, and it ends up boosting, actually, that background noise. So we built a classifier, and we built and trained a classifier to the right levels that can actually understand now intelligently the difference between when I am trying to speak to it, when you're actually speaking, versus what is crosstalk. And once you have that, you can see the results can be pretty emphatic. You can choose not to gain correct the crosstalk, or actually you can choose to attenuate it, which is what gives you those dramatic differences. So these are the ways in which we're trying to improve the problems that particular environments now are causing. Now, I know we talked about working from home, And there's a new peril, have you heard, of working from home, and that is children. So I know you may have seen this a couple of times, and we'll actually show you the demo of it, and we'll actually get to meet the engineer whose team actually built this feature in our demo. But again, this is where it fits in our strategy. Sure, you've seen it, but this is how we go about things like this, because we realize that, hey, a lot of times people will not turn their video on because of things like this. A lot of times when they turn it on, they'll have issues. And it may just be a messy background. It may just be a distracting background that you have out there. And it's really good to have that control over your meeting. So now, one of the ways, so we talked about all these external ways in which meetings can get impacted, about how we are going beyond. Let's switch a little bit and talk about the internal ways. Now, we know that one of the best ways of getting you into the meeting quickly and then being able to run your meeting smoothly is just being familiar with the product, just making it easy for you to do what it is that you want to do, whether it's sharing your screen or muting yourself or turning on your video or whatever it is. So just as a principle, we built that right from the ground up. Just like you looked at our architecture, our client architecture is also built from the ground up to be a common architecture. And that means that whether you're on a beautiful Surface Book or a Mac or an iPad or even your browser or even mobile form factors, you will see a consistent experience with Teams clients. So if you're familiar with using it on the iPad and then you go ahead and decide to take that call on the bus from your Android phone, you're not lost or struggling to get into the meeting. A couple of examples around that as well. We've all seen mobile join on VoIP for meetings. I'll show you again how we solved the problem of dialing into meetings. We talked about this earlier. A lot of people have their favorite ways of dialing into meetings and conference IDs. I know some people like to write it on their arms. Some people like to pull over, park, take out your meeting invite, take out your phone, and then go and type the 8 numbers. We got rid of that. And the idea, again, is that when you do things this simply, it's easy for you to be able to get into a meeting quickly. It's easy for your meeting to start quicker. It's easy for you to be able to get more done. The other area that we focused on as well, just I'm going to take that as an example and we'll go into our demo, is the experience of joining a meeting when you're not a Teams user. So a lot of you schedule meetings with people that are not parts of your team, or not a part of your team, or even your organization, right? And some of these people don't have Teams installed, but it's great. I mean, you can invite them. And this is why we invested so much effort into building a native Teams meeting join experience in browsers. Without having to download a plugin, you can go ahead and join the Teams meeting from Edge or from Chrome. And this is really easy, again, because it all goes back to the fact if you have people in a meeting that are struggling to get into a meeting, your meeting is going to start later, and it is going to lead to lower productivity. So we support anonymous join. You can tell us who you are, and you can join into the meeting. Let's look at that demo real quick. Just another quick thing, we also support that on mobile. So it's not just a browser. You could just, we've gone across the full range of devices and made that available. I'm going to show you a quick demo. Just setting up the demo real quick. What you're going to see is it's a meeting that Christian set up to talk with a few engineers back home in Seattle. Chris is in the meeting. I'm going to pretend to be the external partner that's going to join this meeting. So I don't have Teams, and this is going to be my experience of
That's
joining
your machine.
Teams. I'm going to go ahead and click to join it. Notice it takes me into the web experience, takes me to my Edge browser. I choose to join on web. It goes ahead and asks me. There we go.
And we also have the same pre-join experience now also in the browser, so that also your partners, your customers also can check out, as Mark was saying the other day, that the hair fits and everything. So.
Does it?
Yeah, it does.
Right. OK, great. So I'm the external user, and I'm going to go ahead and join the meeting. And again, this meeting has been configured to be in a way that external users will join into the lobby. And as soon as someone else who's in the meeting lets me in, there we go. I'm in the meeting. There it was, anonymous join, external join, without having to download anything. For the first time, you don't have to download anything. It's easy for you to get in, no plugins. You just get in natively. All right, so now in our meeting, we've got a couple of our engineers over there. We've got Rajiv and Phil. And here's our MVP who decided to join the meeting as well. Anders, welcome. And there's Phil, and Phil's the PM that, we've seen the background blur feature a couple of times this week. I just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce Phil as the, as the PM. Phil and his team built the background blur feature. Turn it on, Phil. I don't know if you can hear us. Turn it on.
There we go.
There we go. All right. So they spent a lot of effort, and a quick round of applause for these guys.
And actually, Phil worked really hard to ship that feature this week so that all of you now really can make that happen. So I think he really deserves a lot of applause for that.
There's a lot of BBC dads that are happy to see that feature.
Yeah.
All right. And now we'll switch over.
Yes, but I need to recable because he took that cable from Amazon.
Okay. So while Christian figures that out, we're also going to show you the join experience on Mac. So Christian's on his Mac. Remember, Christian's the person who set up this meeting, so he is internal to this meeting. And while he gets that, oh, great. Looks like we're up.
Cool. So exactly same experience actually as before, that the projector is flipping around. No. Okay, works. So the client actually is really the same, right? So the user experience for your users on a Mac or on a PC are always the same. And as we saw also from the web join before, I have also the pre-join experience here, so I can decide if I like to join muted, maybe to not interrupt that meeting before. Wow, that projector is really. And also to check my hair out, etc. So now I decide to join muted. So in that case, but now as I speak, also the Mac client, of course, will show me up, hey, your microphone is muted, and I can go ahead and unmute myself so that everyone will be able to hear me, right? So it's just the same experience. In the past, there was always a little bit of a delay in Skype for Business when the features showed up on a Mac, yeah? So now it's really the same code base, and features will show up immediately as well. So that's really, I think, a great news for all our lovely Mac users.
Just another quick feature there. Also, we've also saw that a lot of times people will join into a meeting and then either they're driving and they cause noise into it. That's how I know a lot of people in my team join the meeting when I can hear the noise. So on mobile, you will join muted because we know that there's always background noise there and you can unmute yourself to speak. And on the desktop clients or the browsers, if there's more than 4 people in a meeting, if there's 4 or more people in a meeting, we will just always by default join you muted. Of course, in that join experience that you saw, you will have the opportunity to join unmuted if you wish, but it's just not the way that we're just trying to make meetings go more smoothly and with fewer interruptions.
Yep. And of course, we have also the experience to start the recording, etc. And for me, that's really a big deal, right? So in the past, when someone was telling me in Skype for Business, hey, can you please record a meeting, I was always, oh, yeah, now I have to take care, I need to upload all that stuff, I cannot leave my PC because I need to end the recording, etc., right? And with cloud recording, I just hit the button, I record it, and if I have to go, I have to go, right? And I can just stop it later or just let it run until the meeting ends. So I think it's somehow related for me also to quality because it improves my life quality because I can leave my PC and jump into my car and drive, right? So it makes it just much more easier for me as well in that case. Cool, let's plug back. Now I do all the plugging, huh? Let me go. Thanks, guys. And
okay. How many of you here own a car? Great, wow, I did not expect that response. Well, we all know it's one thing to buy a really great car, but it's a whole other thing to maintain it properly. So I just told you about how we built this beautiful car and it has all these beautiful features in it. Well, let me just take a few minutes and talk to you about how we are operating this behind the covers. Again, this goes back to the same tenet that we had about we're going to look at all aspects of anything that impacts a meeting reliability or quality. And that includes going all the way down to how we operate the service, how our engineers work on it on a daily basis. So we're architected on top of a microservice architecture. This is the cloud world, so I won't go ahead and talk a lot about what that means. I think that the impact of that is that when things fail or when things don't work well, it's not like the entire meeting doesn't work well. So, if there's an issue with a particular chat being delayed, that doesn't result in the meeting being down. And again, all of this is on top of the infrastructure investments that we've made that help with the as well. And that's the other part of this, the part that we talked about how we're born in the cloud and the choices that we made right all the way from the architecture to ensure that even the architecture eliminates or minimizes all the things that plague real-time media. Things like ingress, egress issues, things like we talked about our principles of keeping the path short, keeping our exposure, I would say, to the public internet as minimal as possible, without really being that much of work needed by the IT pros or even the end user for that matter. So those are our principles that kind of we are built on top of that help us avoid all these kind of issues. We also have tuned our data. You've seen many examples of how we've tuned some of these triggers that we had for, like, for example, the network loss and so on. It's one thing to actually build the trigger. It's a whole other thing to actually have the data that we can tune it on so that it's timely, so that it's accurate, and we don't have false positives. Because the entire thing could just look great on paper, but just not work well when you actually go roll this out. And what enabled us to do this was our investments in the end-to-end telemetry. And when I say end-to-end, I mean all the way from the client to the service and to all the other network components in between as well. And these are the things that have helped us tune it to the point that it becomes, the scenario goes to being magical. Of course, we built on a culture of A/B testing. Every change that we've made gets A/B tested. A lot of things that we roll out actually start with A/B testing. And these are the kind of things that help us, like I said, be able to tweak the thresholds just so that they work just right, as opposed to firing incorrectly or just being a lot of false positives and so on. And finally, machine learning. You know, you'll hear a lot of buzz about machine learning. I just wanted to, again, share with you a little bit insight from the product team itself, where it's more than kind of like a buzzword. It's about how we're actually using machine learning. That algorithm that you saw that's powering the background blur is actually a complicated convolutional neural network that is working on data that we fed to it, that it's able to decide what is the background and what is not. If you notice, it doesn't require a green screen for it to work, right? It doesn't require you a certain lighting for it to work. It just works, and it works beautifully. And the reason why is because we've trained it on a lot of data. We've trained it on the data that we think is optimal for it. And that's how we've gotten to the point. That's how the magic happens. Another maybe more not as exciting example is, you know, even on the service side, we are constantly responding to issues on our side. And an issue could just be, you know, a certain API that's not working as well as we expect it to. And as you can imagine, sometimes that'll cause a lot of noise. There was a certain API that we used to get a lot of alerts from on weekends. And there was a certain API that when we monitored certain deployments or certain tenants that had low usage that were just on-ramping the product, we would get a lot of alerts because one meeting would go badly and then it would just result in an alert because guess what? That was 20% of their usage. So we've used anomaly detection algorithms even in our alerting to actually be able to help us respond to A, generate the right alerts, B, in a way that we can respond to it fast enough and not get triggered by false alerts, either false negatives or false positives, both of those. So that's where we're using kind of these tenets in our day-to-day operations. We've got constant feedback, everything, every issue that we see, every meeting that goes flawlessly, we measure that on our side. And going back again to what I talked about before, we've tied that back to our metrics. And again, like I said, our metrics are not about minimizing the failures that we had. They're about maximizing the flawless or the perfect productive meetings that we can deliver. So it goes all the way back into that is basically the point here. All right, so we saw a lot of stuff here. Let's just do a quick recap of that. So things that we are doing to keep meetings going smoothly. So we looked at the automatic roaming and the reconnect features that deal with your with VILE networks. We looked at the falling back to the audio only or the PSTN dial-in triggered by the user when the network isn't reliable or whether the user just wants to take the call on their phone. We looked at some of the codec tools that we've built, everything from FEC, the forward error correction, to long-term reference frames, to a lot of the things that go deep down inside the bandwidth estimation that help us deliver that. We automatically adapt the video resolution and the frame rate all the way to go from 100 kbps video to all the way up to 4 mbps video. And that's the part where I was talking about where the nuances of whether you want to make this particular frame look good or whether you want to keep the frame rate high. That complicated decision is something that we've invested a lot of time in. And then we talked about the smart selection of devices, whether it's avoiding a device that we know is not great or whether it's selecting the best device to start with. And then when things don't go right, automatically adapting to that, letting the user stay in the meeting that way. And then we've also looked at some auto muting and some device alerts when things don't go right or whether your device isn't working correctly, as a matter of fact. We didn't look at all of our alerts, obviously, but we have alerts based on device quality as well. If your device were not failing spectacularly, but really just adding a lot of noise into the meeting. If your device were just not working enough, that it's not picking up enough of your audio, it will tell you, and it'll try to tell you the things that you can do to fix that, as opposed to just hanging up and trying again and doing that ad nauseum. And then the other thing we worked on was a faster setup. We flipping a little bit from keeping you into the meeting to getting you into the meeting quickly, so you have more productive time and less time spent doing debugging of issues that happen. So like I said, you can join faster in your browsers. You've got frictionless dial-in. We looked at a couple of PSTN examples. The anonymous join for external users, which is what I did as a Contoso employee. We're also using more efficient protocols, both on our UDP and TCP side, to set up our meetings much faster. So even the join time, we're actively shaving down millisecond by millisecond off the join time there to just get us in faster. And then we talked about the improved bandwidth control that not only gives you better quality, but is also able to help us decide upfront the way in which we should be joining the meeting that is going to result in the best outcome. So even before you join the meeting, if we are able to decide what the network bandwidth is like and change the methods in which we join the meeting, that gives us more success. And then, of course, echo cancellation, that's an interesting one. It's something that you don't hear about, because if it's working fine, you just don't have a problem. It's when it doesn't work fine is when you have problems. So for every call that we have a very sophisticated echo cancellation algorithm going on, which is even if there are issues with your device, this is not about multiple people causing feedback in the room. Sometimes the device itself isn't great, and it causes and leaks feedback back into the meeting, and that also causes echo. We've got detectors built on top of that, and all the time in a meeting, you've got an echo cancellation algorithm running that is just tweaking the timing of the samples just enough that you don't hear it as an end user, but it's enough to avoid the echo from building up. And of course, we've got the notifications on talking while muted, the open space noise reductions that we talked about, and then the intelligent background blur, which I guess we could say it's done now.
It's done. Check mark.
Check.
Cool. And I know there was a lot of sessions about devices, but I think it's pretty, we work with so many partners that really ensure that you have also super good quality on your devices. So how many of you guys are actually using potentially their iPhone headset to make meetings? Someone? Okay, I will change it. So who was it? I have 3 headsets, so you should show up your hands again. One for you. Someone else?
Christian's handing out.
Yeah.
Christian, would you like to let them know what they want?
Huh? I will give it to him over there. So you can pick up the headset at the Sennheiser booth.
Christian's handing out coupons to go pick up a Sennheiser headset from their booth, because
who was first?
We want you to use
we have
the
a judge over
devices.
there. Cool. Yeah, so it's really important to make sure that you have, of course, the right devices, right? And we work with all those great partners. You can check out all of the devices for our different workspaces. So for the personal workspace, when you're on the go, just with a USB headset, or with a desk phone, the mobile phone stations, I think they are pretty exciting. Yeah, you put the phone on, you have the headset there, and you can get started directly. Then I love the speaker PUC. Now we have the Jabra 710 that will have the Teams button directly, so it will flash you when you have a missed call, when you have a scheduled meeting, so just hit the button and you're good to go. So, and then of course all the mobile phones, shared devices, and now we have 7 partners for Skype room systems, yeah. And it's also a quality thing, because you run into that meeting, and the device will actually detect, oh, you're already in that meeting, and you join as a companion muted as well, right? And you can drive your content directly, so it makes stuff really, really easy in that case.
I hope you guys had the chance to check out some of the device-specific focused sessions that we had earlier this week. There was a couple of really good ones.
Yeah, and then we now also have that new website where we now can, so we just launched it this week, where you can check out all the devices, also based on the spaces, to see which device fits where. And then all of our partners are also here to get some, and a lot of them have also games to win some additional devices. Cool. Then for the admins. So what we actually do, so we have call analytics that now also supports fully Teams. Yeah, so you can get all that good stuff now in the Skype for Business and Teams admin portal, so to really see how your users is doing. So, and really, And to check, as we just spoke, what kind of device are those users using. My most loved example is from a customer a couple of years ago. So actually, I think it was the IT lead of the company who called actually my counterpart, the UC lead, and was saying, Skype is doing really bad. I have always really bad quality. So we figured out, of course, he didn't use any headset, first of all. Second, actually so he used speakers of his laptop, and the laptop was actually docked in and closed. So not the best experience, right? So, but at least he was totally able to see in the report, oh, you didn't use a headset. Where was your laptop? Oh, it was in the docking station. What do you expect, right? But the problem often is then that those guys are probably the people that speak the most in such a meeting. And then 20 people will say, oh, the quality is always bad. Yeah, but it's that one particular person. Yeah, and that feeds then also back. So we give that to the user, but also to you as an admin, we give you all that information here as well.
One of the main things philosophically that we found was that in many cases, the person or the persona that is very empowered to be able to fix issues or even plan ahead, so to avoid issues, is the IT admin or the IT person that's helping to deploy this. It goes everything, all the way from managing setting up your network in a way that egress is optimal. Like we talked about at the beginning of the deck, it's about managing your network in a way that it gets to the Microsoft backbone as quickly as possible and doesn't wander over the internet. It's also about doing things like making sure that the right ports are open, right? Making sure that UDP is enabled to flow for real-time traffic. We know that it's sensitive to, that it needs, for it to work best, it needs UDP. So part of this, a lot of the devices, in many companies and organizations, the devices are distributed by the company as well, right? It's not just your personal devices. So all of those are choices that you can go one way or the other that impact meeting quality and reliability. So our philosophy was to bring this persona along because everyone has these shared goals. So we want to bring them along. We want to empower them in a way that they can do the best by their users. They can do the best by their company. They're able to manage their networks. They're able to manage devices and everything else to be able to do this. And for that, we've spent significant effort in tools like call analytics and call quality dashboard, which will give you various reports that give you all this information.
Exactly. So, and then same for quality dashboard, now also using a view for Skype and Teams. And there is a much deeper session going on this week, and I think I have that on the last slide here. So really the four takeaways are here. Now lower latency use, you will start to see the results of the calls after 30 minutes now in CQD. Yeah, so it gives you really, really quick the information. And then really to provide more flexible and to customize your own reports, and also with the Power BI connector to really also prove afterwards to your management, hey, all the investments that we made, yeah, they really reflect also. Yeah. And then, as I said, there is a really deep session about that and how you can use all that new tools and create data models later this week. And there is the session code for that, and then you have really the engineers that are particularly working on that.
So if you haven't seen call quality dashboard, if you are in that role, if you are in that persona, I highly recommend that you download that and take a look at it. There's some really powerful stuff that you can do. Just start by looking at what's happening in your network. Just start by getting those signals back about how many calls are going bad because of bad devices or bad network and so on. And then you can graduate from there to actually taking action on it and doing more things. Yeah.
And the great thing is also, I mean, it's a single place. It's also you go into Skype and Teams admin portal, you search for the user, and you have all that data on a fingertip directly, right? And also now with the upcoming Skype for Business Server 2019, you will be also able to push your data from on-premise into the same dashboard so that you have really a single view now. Yeah. Cool. So these are just, I think, most of the team sessions, at least where we're told to include that everywhere. So that just gives you some additional resources where you can check out in general about Teams, about the journey from Skype to Teams, etc.
There's some pretty cool stuff in here. If you are part of a role that's creating content for your own organization, for deploying Teams meetings, some of these, if you want to see how people are really using Teams meeting in exciting ways that you didn't know existed before, there's every time I see someone watching those, I always see them walk away with like, oh, I did not know you could do that with Teams, or that's a great use case. And even as product owners, we'll build something and then we always get this feedback about how people are using it in ways that we actually hadn't envisioned, but which are amazing. So it's a really cool resource to see some of those videos on YouTube and so on. Educate yourself as well as folks in your organization.
Yeah, And then there's also a public Office 365 champion program where you can sign up to be a champion. There are monthly calls, etc. That gives you also then really good insights and additional resources.
Cool. It looks like we had some turbulence at the beginning, but we got good weather after. So we were able to get into our gate on time. So it's great. Please evaluate the session. If you liked it, go ahead and evaluate it. If you didn't like it, please don't evaluate it. I'm kidding. Give us the feedback. We need it.
Yeah. Right. But we should get good ratings because people can go earlier to the happy hour now.
And yes, exactly. Go to the happy hour. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.